you're looking for a trip.
Alrighty, good evening. Welcome to the Top 25 Rundown, presented by the Sportscast. Today's date is December 21st, 2022. If you haven't yet, please subscribe on all your channels: YouTube, Twitter, Twitch.tv, and Apple Podcasts. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. It'll help us out tremendously. You can listen to us on your smart speaker, play Sportscast. Visit us on thesportscast.net. Also follow us on Twitter, the Sportscast1, and check out our app, the Sportscast, in the iOS App Store. My name is Alan West. That is Tyler Turner, and today we have a recurring guest, Christopher Caravello, who is the writer for West Coast College Football at co-host of the Southern Gentleman Sports Show on the Ticket 8:50 a.m. in Pensacola, Florida. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing good.
Well,
Thanks for having me back.
Hey, glad to do it. I mean, we're looking forward, and also it's National Signing Day. It's been an interesting day so far, and I know I saw Ohio State made a few moves, but Tyler, I mean, what was it? What's going on? Oregon doing something today?
Yeah. So I always, over the last probably since about 2015, I've been starting about 2015, I just really got into the last week, 2 weeks of recruiting and the signing day, and I follow along really closely. And I got so intensely into it those last couple of weeks in 2015-16 that in 2017, I decided to start following the recruiting process all the way from basically the end of the National Signing Day, the 1 year, all the way up until National Signing Day the next year. And it's kind of been my hobby. I've created the team talent formula, which is similar to the team talent composite. So it's something that I just really enjoy. I just really enjoy it. And why I enjoy it sometimes, I really have no idea, because it can drive you nuts. Like, you can be extremely excited because you just landed a 5-star in July, and then by February, he's flipping. It happened this year. Or it's not even February anymore. What am I talking about? It's December. That's something that's changed since I started following recruiting. Early signing day didn't start until, was it 2018 or 19? I can't even remember now. So it's always just been a big day for me following it. Who is going to pull off the signing day run? Who's going to go on the run on signing day that you're flipping a bunch of 4 or 5 stars, you're signing a bunch of 4 and 5 stars, you're the team that really makes a move from way outside the top 20 into the top 10 or something like that. And I'm an Oregon fan, and I make no scruples about that. We were the team this year. We were the team that was number 15 in the recruiting rankings going into signing day. And as of right now, we're number 7. So we flipped 5-star Peyton Bowen from Notre Dame. We flipped Austin Novosad from Baylor. We flipped Jaden Lamar from Notre Dame. We flipped Dalen Austin from LSU. We came from behind to sign 5-star Mateo Ugalale. Yeah, I can't say his name for the life of me. DJ's younger brother. We signed him today, a 5-star out of St. John Bosco Prep. It was a terrific day for Oregon, and no way to put. Oh, and then they just signed a Johnny Cornelius, who was the number 1 offensive lineman in the portal at the end of the night. So it was a pretty remarkable day. So
It sounds like it's definitely off to a good start. Chris, what have you noticed so far that caught your attention, whether it's for Florida State or for another school so far?
And I'd have to echo what Ty just said about Oregon. You know, the consensus was that the Ducks were dealt a huge blow, losing Dante Moore, five-star quarterback, ranked number 3 in a lot of those recruiting rankings. They lost him over the weekend to UCLA. That was actually a huge get for Chip Kelly. You know, as you looked at the Bruins' future in the Big Ten, Moore is from Michigan, so I think that had a lot to do with being able to sell to him. He's going to have some home or away games right in his family's backyard. And that's staying power for the Bruins and Chip Kelly, because a lot of their team that did so well this year on the field was built on the transfer portal. You're going to lose those guys. Bobo, the wide receiver, Chardonnay, the running back from Michigan. So as you look to the Bruins' future, I think getting more kind of adds legitimacy to Chip. But you know, they're leaving the conference. As far as who's staying in the Pac-12, it's Oregon. Like I said, they lost more on the recruiting battle, but they reload by flipping Notre Dame's prize possessions in the safety Bowen and the running back Lamar, and getting that transfer portal going. That's a huge part of this. It's not just getting these guys out of high school. You're getting polished players from the FCS level, some of the FBS teams, and getting Cornelius. That was huge for the Ducks. I already have a really good offensive line. So I think that, going into it being kind of down, some of the Ducks fans were about losing more. And at the end of the night, you're number 7. And I don't think they're done either. So Dan Lanning continuing that recruiting prowess that they were kind of worried about, losing Mario Cristobal, who was such a huge recruiter. But Lanning is definitely not letting up. So big day for the Ducks and the West Coast.
Absolutely, Owen, Tyler. I will bring this up one more time, okay? Dan Lanning is not going to go anywhere. He's going to stay at Oregon, okay?
I don't know. He might go somewhere. He's not going anywhere right now. So backstory to that, Chris. He posted this article when the Auburn search was. Lanning's name came up. It was something silly like that. And I knew, first of all, I didn't think Auburn was going to go after Lanning. He'd just become the head coach at Oregon. And the plausibility of him heading out to Auburn immediately. It was a stupid fan side article by a low IQ, low information journalist. So I was like, get that trolling article out of here. But
you got me. I admit it.
I think to touch on we got great news on Sunday night that Bo Nix was coming back, and that's obviously huge for the upcoming year. But then the very next day, we find out that Dante Moore flips to UCLA. So it was like, wow, we get Nix back, but then we lose this consensus 5-star top 5 player, and for them to immediately pivot and land a Elite 11 participant, an Army All-American participant, and a consensus top 10 quarterback in Austin Novosad from Baylor was probably one of the more, it's kind of understated, but that's probably one of the more remarkable pivots I've seen in recent memory by anyone. To lose a consensus 5-star and to be able to pivot to another top 10 quarterback nationally was remarkable. I don't think Novosad's as good as Moore, but Novosad is going to be a good player. That just crushed Baylor. He was their prize recruit. Notre Dame tried to flip him. Ohio State tried to flip him. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Oregon does it. The reason why is because Will Stein was the offensive coordinator for Texas San Antonio. So a little story behind that. My uncle is the chief of staff for Texas San Antonio. And he was actually one of the mentors for Will Stein. My uncle also was the offensive coordinator for Jeff Traylor at Gilmer High School when Jeff Traylor was in high school. So I knew it's a really tight community, and where that kid Novosad's from is from near that area in East Texas. So they all know each other really well, and he probably had a really close relationship to Stein. He just wasn't going to go to Texas San Antonio because he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country. He's going to go to a Power 5 school. But once that Stein was able to land a Power 5 job, I immediately think that Novosad's like, man, if I can go there, I'll go there. But Stein's probably like, well, we have Dante Moore, but the second it started to sour on Moore, he probably turned right to Novosad and said, I want you to come with me. And because that's the only way. I mean, how in the world are you going to pivot like that? They literally lost Moore on Sunday. And to land not a scrub, you landed one of the best best quarterbacks in the country. It had to be that connection. There's no other reason that he would have been able to pull that off. I really don't think so.
Yeah. We mentioned on the preseason show that these relationships that these QBs have with the offensive coordinators and the quarterback coach is probably stronger than they have with the overall head coach. We mentioned Dillingham bringing Nix with him, who he coached at Auburn when he ended up at Oregon. And same thing with getting Stein from UT San Antonio, which is a really fun offense. They've had fantastic seasons the last couple of years. They didn't show it in the bowl game this year against Troy, but that definitely came into effect here. And to, like you said, rebound from losing more, you get Novosad, a couple other flips from Notre Dame, slam dunk day for the Ducks.
Yeah, to add to that, like Penix, you're a Husky fan. Penix's relationship with DeBoer, and look how much better he played. Yeah, so if you have a close relationship with someone, they're like they're like your father figure on a daily basis in meetings, and especially at the quarterback position where confidence is everything, and that person really well and trusts them. It makes a major difference, and that's the only plausible way that they made that flip. Honestly, when I first came on my radar, because I follow this incessantly, probably too much, I was like, they're not gonna. How did this? And then I looked into the relationship, and I actually contacted my uncle, and he's like, oh yeah, that kid's right up the street from us. I was like, they're gonna flip this kid. He's gonna all of a sudden flip, and he flipped. So, recruiting's fun, man. It's a journey, and you need to buckle up, because I mean, if you're Notre Dame right now, you're not very happy. If you're USC, man, USC, I just found out they're going to lose Deuce Robinson too. USC had a rough day. Yeah. Actually, do you want to go into that winners and losers from today?
Yeah. The ripple effects that, like you said, a guy is going to get flipped from one program to the next, and another program is going to get burned when that original program has to reach back and convince another player to go there. You brought up my FSU connections as well. They flipped Ohio State quarterback Brock Glenn. Sure enough, Ohio State reaches out to the West Coast and steals Washington's quarterback commit, Lincoln Kleinholtz. So it's like these ripple effects that are going to be felt throughout the National Signing Day, and it's not going to end anytime soon. Alabama goes ahead and steals Iowa's best O-lineman to add to their already number one class. So like you said, it's fun and frustrating. You have to take your fandom out of it sometimes, because at the end of the day, this is a business. And now you're talking about real money with NIL involved.
Yeah. That I did know that Washington lost that kid from Pierre, South Dakota, and he has pretty good upside. That would have been a pretty good pull by you guys. Yeah. So that was a tough one. Caden Proctor from Iowa getting flipped to Alabama. That was tough. Obviously, Notre Dame losing. Both Bowman, Lamar had tough days. Who else had a little bit of a rough day?
I'd say Miami, for as high as their class is ranked, having Cormani McClain not sign his letter of intent this morning.
He might flip to Colorado. And obviously that's a huge loss, because Miami obviously had such a poor year. They need some talent acquisition to turn that thing around. To lose one of the top 10 players in the country would be a really good big kick in the old groin. Yeah. Alabama obviously just had a remarkable day again. 6 5-stars, the consensus number one class. Georgia, extremely good day. Signed a 5-star edge guy and that Wilson kid.
Venice, yep.
Like some teams just didn't have a lot of noise, but it worked out because they had a pretty good class in boat. I think of Tennessee, they're going to have a top 10 class. Florida was able, and Penn State were able to level out. I really think USC, you thought they were going to pull Mateo Aguilera. You thought they're going to pull Deuce Robinson. You thought they might even flip a couple other guys, and for them to not land any of them, and they're going to have to lean on the portal again because they kind of undersigned. I think that's kind of a failure for Lincoln, if you want my opinion, because he obviously signed a great portal class last year, but a lot of those guys are gone. Travis Dye's gone. Jordan Addison's gone. The kid from that kid guy went to UCLA, wrong team. But he also, there's also a couple other guys that he signed in the portal that are going to be going straight to the pros. And he needed to land some more prep guys, just more numbers. And for him to miss on some of the higher targets and to not have any backup plans, now he might do better in the second signing period. I would actually say USC was a loser today.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're going to have to hit the portal exactly what they did his first year to sign what they need. Yeah, he can sell all this flashy offense stuff and the wide receiver room. I'm sure they'll get somebody, in the portal to transfer in. They got their quarterback of the future in Malachi Nelson, but they got just beat up on the lines. And there's not a lot of great offensive line and defensive line prospects out in California right now. There's plenty of receivers and obviously quarterbacks to send all over the country, but where USC obviously needs significant improvements on if they're going to be a serious contender is the lines and on the defensive side of the ball. And I just don't trust Lincoln Riley to pay that close enough attention. I don't trust Alex Grinch as a defensive coordinator, and I think this recruiting signing day reflects that.
Yeah, because they're losing most of their best linemen, like Andrew Voorhees, Justin Diedrich. There's another guy I'm thinking of. They're all gone, and I didn't see anyone that was a high level prospect that they signed or even got in the portal. And I know they continue. They got Malachi Nelson. They got Zachariah Branch. They signed Dorian Singer from the portal, but they have good wide receivers. They have a great quarterback. They're the Heisman Trophy winner. But where are they addressing the offensive and defensive line? And so they're a team that I think has something to be their class had something to be desired. Sorry, I can't get my words together. I'm trying to think of someone else, another team out there. I actually thought Utah signed a pretty good class. We could go back to Pac-12. Yeah, for them, a top 20 class, I think is pretty solid. I think Washington had a pretty good class, a class around the top 25. They're probably going to have to hit the portal a little bit, I'm assuming, right? Yeah,
they already are. They went and got Nagata, the running back who transferred out of ASU. And, when DeBoer got there, he mentioned how thin the running back room was. He wasn't happy with what was coming back. There was a few holdovers from the Peterson and Lake era, like Cam Davis, that, I think are going to stay on the roster and thrive. But beyond that, they needed depth. So getting Nagata was huge because they're going to lose their transfer the running back from last year, Talapapa, his career is over. I don't know if he's going pro, but yeah, they're going to they recruited this year to the positions of need, which were the secondary. That was not the Washington secondary we were accustomed to seeing. So I think hitting that hard is a cornerback heavy recruiting class, especially with Caleb Presley flipping from Oregon and staying home. This, I think, speaks volumes to Washington fans because finally you see the best player in the state not getting poached by Ohio State or Oregon. He's staying home. That's the optics for that is huge. So I think that they recruited to their needs, and it's going to end up being a solid class, the first full one under DeBoer.
I think I'm not really worried about Washington next year. Where I'd start worrying about Washington is in the future, because obviously, I always say obviously. I know I always say obviously. 2 years ago, you didn't have a great class, Jimmy Lake's first class. And then last year, obviously, because of the transition, you didn't land a very good class. So, and then this class, while it's not bad, it probably still not quality enough that when you have the Roman Adozos, the Jalen McMillans, the Michael Penix leave, ZTF leave, I think 2 years from now, you'll maybe see the repercussions of not landing a little better class and because of the bad late classes. The 2 bad late classes, and then this class is not bad, but you're having to make up for 2 bad classes. I would be a little concerned for Washington, not next year, because next year everyone came back. All your key players ended up coming back. They didn't go pro, and you guys were 10-2. Honestly, you got screwed over. If USC hadn't blown the Pac-12 championship, you'd be playing in the Rose Bowl, and so I'm not that concerned with them next year. You're going to at least come into the season with a top 15 team. I mean, actually, I think the Pac-12 might have 4 top 15 teams. I mean, there's a decent chance that USC, Oregon, Washington, and Utah are all in the top 15. Wouldn't you say next year?
Yeah, I would agree with that. They closed really well. Utah, obviously, raising the banner again as Pac-12 champions, and Washington had to, like you said, they had to overcome those horrific lake or lack thereof recruiting classes, and he did that. He got some key players to transfer in. He convinced the players that were already on the roster to come back last year. And now they're coming back again using that COVID year, to the program's advantage. This is built for win now, because losing Kleinholz, we don't know what we have in Heward yet. We just don't. 5-star doesn't matter. He did not look ready, but not really a lot of fault on the kid when you had these clowns as offensive coordinators, in Washington last year. So I think that we're holding our breath, waiting to see what this program looks like, what this offense looks like without Penix Jr. at quarterback. But I think that up to this point, he's outkicked expectations remarkably well, and hopefully next year, the results on the recruiting trail, continue to trend upward. But I think it is going to be a solid year for the Pac-12 going into 2023, and I'm excited for it.
Is Dylan Moore still on the roster?
He is.
Well, good on DeBoer for keeping these guys from all heading the portal. I mean, there is some mastery to that. I do know some programs the head coaches have the ability to keep second and third team guys on the. There's some programs where you just see these max exodus left and right, and then you see other programs where the coach obviously has the ability to convince backup and third string quarterbacks to stay on the roster. So good for him.
Yeah. You wanted to talk about like who maybe surprised today on signing day, and you look at the rankings right now as they stand, where the playoff participants are. Michigan, TCU. TCU in the top 20, I think, is fantastic for them. I think they got staying power going ahead in this new look Big 12 that's going to lose Oklahoma and Texas, and especially being in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, like they're set up for success. Michigan at 17, maybe they're not done, but the big surprise to me is the other USC. South Carolina, number 16 right now. They had a fantastic end to a really weird season to them. Spencer Rattler was non-existent until Tennessee came to town, and they just beat the brakes off them. And they've really continued that momentum. I'm surprised to see him this high, but hats off to Shane Beamer. Maybe this thing can work out, and surprise some folks in the East.
I want to make mention of Michigan. Michigan has done terrific in the transfer portal. They're number 1 in the transfer portal rankings right now. They have landed 5 guys that are regraded as transfer portal blue chippers. I don't think you should necessarily fill up your roster with transfer portal, but when you can get like they got a all Pac-12 center, they got another guy that was a starting tackle for Stanford, they got the freshman All-American from Nebraska. Where Michigan's class, if you look at it from their prep ranking, which is outside the top 15, you might be like, oh, that's a little lower than you would like. How good they did in the transfer portal and how many good players they have coming back next year. J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, good offensive line, some good defensive players. I think Michigan is doing when I'm doing my team talent formula rankings, I'm going to look at Michigan's model, because Michigan, where in just raw data, they're more in that like 15 top 15, top 20 instead of that top 10 roster talent, but how he's being smart and who he brings in from the portal, how he's developing the guys that he has. You see the success the last 2 years. They've back-to-back Big Ten championships, back-to-back college football playoff appearances. I think Michigan probably makes the national title game this year. And I just think that in today's college football, where things are a little different, the transfer portal, NIL, like, is there a different method of accumulating talent that's maybe not your traditional landing number one classes each year? And I'm looking at Michigan right now and what they've done the last couple of years, maybe a little outside the normal talent level on paper baseline, but how the different manners that they're accumulating it, I think has been a kind of a trajectory that should be followed, maybe a science that should be followed more. And maybe TCU's even doing that. They're another team that is done very good in the portal. They landed very good last year in the portal. I think they landed a top 10 class in the portal, and look what ended up happening this year. Whereas you looked at the baseline talent, was outside the top 25, but they landed some key players at key positions, and look what the results they got. So I'm just looking at some different methods that maybe people can accumulate talent outside of the traditional, like, oh, you got to land top 10 classes through the prep ranks every year. Maybe there's different ways to accumulate talent and still be able to achieve college football playoff level teams on the field.
I agree with that. And I would look at Florida State as another example of that. Norvell really was not killing it recruiting wise, which is a sin in the state of Florida. How could you not, have good recruiting classes with so many blue chip prospects in your backyard? But he did it last year, convincing a lot of players from a lot of different parts of the country to come to Tallahassee. They're sitting here with a chance at a 10-win season, beat the hell out of Miami, who had a way better signing classes than they have recently, and beat Florida finally. So I think that, and they're doing it again now. I think they're number 3 in the transfer portal ranking. So he's obviously selling something to very mature players that, want to finish their careers on a high note. And, I think he's translating it to success on the field. So it's a principle that you mentioned that's a little, unique, not just relying on prep players, but, in Florida State and Miami's case, I think you eventually have to go to the well and hit those recruiting powerhouse high schools in the state if you want staying power. And I think that, he's going to have to start doing that. Same with Napier. Cristobal, obviously, he's a recruiting genius, so I think he's going to figure it out. But those other two are going to have to do that.
Yeah, so just even like last year when I look at it, at the transfer portal rankings, USC was number 1. USC finished 11-2. They're one game away from winning and making the college football playoff, and that was coming after a 4-8 year. LSU was number 3. LSU won the SEC West, played for an SEC title in Brian Kelly's first year. UCLA 9-3. They were competitive in the top 10 for much of the year. Florida State, top 15 team. They were 9-3. Number 13, TCU. TCU is number 3 and playing for the college football playoff. So I do think, if necessary, to lean a little bit more in the portal, because the thing is, when the portal first came about, it seemed like the guys exiting mostly were guys that were not playing. But it's a little different now. You now have FCS All-Americans. You have 4-year because of COVID. So, but 3-year starters in a group of 5 schools, like good group of 5 schools, like Cincinnati and UCF. You have guys that are very productive for Power 5 teams that maybe are just not as competitive, like in Indiana or Arizona. And so you're having actually really good players exit into the portal. And if you're able to accumulate enough of these very productive players, we've seen this year specifically, the results are showing on the field. So you want to still accumulate talent through the prep ranks, but I do think if you have the ability to also what's the word I'm trying to look at, to along with the prep talent acquisition, also have some transfer portal acquisition. If you can do both, because of the development period not being as long, because you have guys heading to the portal if they're not immediately seeing the field at the better schools, at the Alabamas, the Georgias. Therefore, in order to be able to bring in some experience on the roster, you're probably going to have to bring in some transfer portal guys. And I even look at Oregon this past year. Their quarterback was one of the best quarterbacks in Pac-12, transfer portal. Their two leading rushers were both in the transfer portal, Marquise Irvin and Noah Wainham. Their best cornerback, Christian Gonzalez, who's going to be a first-round pick, was transfer portal. So the portal is definitely, you don't want to live there, I don't think, but you're seeing some teams are finding pretty good results from going there. And especially if you're lagging on the field, maybe put a little more emphasis on the portal. Lagging in prep recruiting, put a little more emphasis on the portal, and that can offset your lack of success through prep recruiting.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
I was just wondering if the word you were thinking of, Tom, may have been combination, just because with the prep recruiting and with the transfer portal.
I don't know. I'm tired. My brain's not working right.
I hear you. It's okay. It's okay.
Offset. I think offset. Do you need to offset it with? Do it in conjunction. Actually, a word.
Okay.
That's a good word.
I think you need to do both. But if you're Alabama, but the thing is, Alabama, you saw a mass exodus. I'd have to go look, but I think they had like 15, 20 guys headed to the portal. The problem you could be in Texas A&M had like something to that extent. If you're having that many guys leave, you could be signing these top 5 classes and have all them leave, or a good majority of them leave. And it's tough to then move forward and actually develop the next year and say, oh, those guys weren't as good last year, but there be these really talented players from last year that only fielded a 7-5 team are now a year older and a year better. They're now gone. So you have to find a way to offset those losses. And I think you do have to do that through the portal.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
Alabama, I think, lost like its entire wide receiver room. It's crazy, the roster turnover. And I think that if you do have this mass exodus, and even with a top class coming in, there's no continuity, and that's not good either. So it's really a balancing act. The fact that this is happening in conjunction with NIL is crazy, because it adds a totally different element to the recruiting game. It used to be the bagmen, all these shady dudes in the deep South with bags of McDonald's bags full of $100 bills. That's out in the open now. And you're talking about real money. And the fact that so many of the top recruits are signed already, I think that the coaches actually use that to their advantage and said, look, if I'm going to hand you 6 figures to come play at my school, I need your answer now. Because if you don't, I'm moving on to the next guy and I'm waving this cash in front of him. So I think that it came into play, and that's why so many of them are signed right now. But it's going to be interesting if those guys take the money and leave. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with all those players at A&M or Alabama that have these NIL deals, and now they're not even on campus anymore. Do you give the money back? Do you still get the cash at the next location you're jumping ship to? It's crazy going forward. And I give Jimbo credit, for speaking up about it. Don't like him for a lot of different reasons, but he's got a point when he's saying that there needs to be some sort of regulation here, because I don't think, I'm glad that the players have so much power. They should have been getting some sort of, level compensation, but man, this is just, it's crazy right now. And I don't know if this is the healthy future the sport wants to see.
What about also the fact that now, instead of trying to do like the bowl games, how you're sitting out the bowl games now for your draft stock, just because before, unless it's a playoff game, most people now say, okay, we're going to skip the bowl games, which in the past, that was something that everyone had looked forward to. And so watching now some of the players, it's like, okay, well, the team's going to be there, but now we're not going to help them. And it's like, So you're willing to help out the whole year, and just because the awards have already come out and like the All American stats has come out, oh well, now I can look at my draft stock and I don't really care about the team anymore now. So it kind of feels in some ways like they're, I don't want to say walking away from the team, but it feels like they're kind of devaluing the team, which I get that for the NFL draft. Sure, you're going to make a lot of money, but I kind of feel that for the postseason, you'd want to try to do more. But that being said, watching some of that and also just for the transfer portal, it ends on the 15th of January. So I think we still have a fair amount that's going to happen within the next 3 weeks or just over three
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. You mentioned the bowl games and players sitting out.
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Young and Will Anderson playing in the Sugar Bowl for Alabama is huge because
Yes.
these kids are all copycats.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Christian McCaffrey was the first one to opt out of the bowl game for Stanford. I think they were playing in like some throwaway bowl like the Sun Bowl. And then all of a sudden it was just this snowball effect of players skipping their bowl games. You even have players skipping the Rose Bowl for crying out loud. Clark Phillips not playing this year for Utah. That's insane to me as a Pac-12 Rose Bowl fan. Like I can't imagine, but it's happened. It happened when Washington made it last
Happened
time.
last year with Ohio State with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. They both sat out.
So I'm hoping that Bryce Young and Will Anderson, as I mentioned, playing in their game, kind of it's like if those dudes can play one last college game in a bowl game that's supposedly meaningless, who am I to sit out? That's my hope.
That is why they had to expand the playoff, because of they had to expand the playoff for a multitude of reasons. But between players opting out, this crazy mass exodus of transfer portal, and also all these coaching changes that's happening, it's made bowl games just weird. Like you'll have teams with like 20 guys that are in the portal, so they're short and having to play walk-ons. Half the staff left because the coach left and took another job, and he took all the assistants with him, and so they have a bunch of analysts coaching them, and then they have guys opting out. So between all that, that is why they had to expand the playoff, because you just have to have more teams that have something that they have to play for, like a national title. So then you don't have guys opting out and guys hopping in the transfer portal right away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That being said, going away from recruiting just for a second, what did you guys? Huh?
How dare you?
How dare you? Yeah, I know. How dare me? I know.
On this day.
Yeah, I had a good day.
On this day, but
I have waited 8 years patiently to have a good national signing day.
Okay, well, no, we'll jump right back into it in a second, but this kind of goes with National Signing Day a little bit. How do you think Mississippi State is going to be able to work with their recruits after the passing of Mike Leach?
Man, that's first of all, rest in power,
Yes,
Mike Leach.
exactly.
That was a stunning turn of events. If you live on social media or Twitter, when that started to leak out that he had a health emergency, that just took everybody completely off guard. That's just, can't believe it. Doesn't seem real yet. He went from my school's biggest rival, Wazoo, down to the state of Mississippi, immediately sets the SEC passing record his first game against LSU. So, man, that's just, you feel for his family, and that includes the Mississippi State family. So I don't know. And the only thing I've seen about what they're planning on doing after his passing was, they're going to honor him by putting the pirate flag on the side of the helmets for the bowl game. But I have no idea, really. You look at tragedies that have unfolded during the season or, shortly thereafter, and how programs handle it. This is it's a tough, tough sledding. I don't think he's going to be forgotten anytime soon, and he's got his fingerprints all over that program. It's interesting to see, how they're able to mitigate that, going forward with this recruiting class.
So they actually landed the number 26 class today, as of right now, and they actually signed all 25 commitments. And they also had a couple guys from transfer portal that were both pretty good. So they're actually did not have a bad day. I actually heard coaches were actually there was some report that leaked out that someone tampered with the roster when they heard something happened to Leach, and someone came out and they said, "Can you believe a guy lost his life and they're trying to tamper?" And I think it made people skittish because then I heard that their commitments people were not touching. Like they're like, if they want to go to Mississippi State, there's commitment to Mississippi State. So I actually think in an odd way, it actually kind of worked out because then I think people stayed away from their commitments instead of harassing them and trying to flip them. At least that's the rumor out there because of the report that said someone tampered and just the ill feeling that gives to everyone. Someone tampering with a dead person, a guy just dies and loses his life, and you try to take players away from his team. That just seems so unethical. But yeah. So actually, they signed a class just outside the top 25 and signed 25 guys. And Zach Arnett, very good defensive coordinator. A passionate guy. I think he was the right guy to promote to the head coaching position. Will he be successful? I don't know. But I think it was a good move for them to move a guy like Arnett. I think it's going to help stabilize the roster, and I think they're going to come out and play pretty spirited in the bowl game. And I hope Mississippi State moving forward has a pretty good team. I hope Zach Arnett is very successful as head coach, and hopefully he's not so successful that someone tries poaching him in a few years. Because I think he had a pretty good future. A lot of people wanted to poach him as a DC. Oregon did. We tried to poach him a couple of years ago. So I think he's a pretty good coach. I think Mississippi State will be okay, but obviously, rest in peace, Mike Leach. He's he was a mad scientist out there, and he was a genius, and his offenses were innovative, and he was unique, and his interviews were like none other. So it was a tragic day when he lost his life, but I think Mississippi State will be fine.
That's what I definitely hope. One thing I think for Lincoln Riley right now, because he was so close to Mike Leach, I think this week and then how they had the memorial service for Mike Leach yesterday at Mississippi State, I think that he kind of this week for him may have affected him more than maybe some would have expected. So that's why maybe for signing day it hasn't gone as well for USC. But the way Lincoln Riley is, I think he's going to rebound. Hey, I could be wrong, but it's just Lincoln Riley. I mean, did you hear the story for how Mike Leach got Lincoln Riley into go into coaching?
No, I do know he was. Yeah, he's from the Mike. Sorry, he is from the Mike Leach tree. I don't know if I'm going to put the equivalence with that being for USC's not up to par because their coaches. They get paid a lot. A lot of times coaches are very single focused in general. And I'm not saying it didn't impact him. And I know he's very close to Leach and he owed Leach a lot for getting him started and helping him become the coach he was. I just don't. I think you're reaching a little bit with that's the reason why USC. Well, I don't think it had any. Because at the end of the day, he's not the only one that is recruiting. His whole staff is recruiting.
Fair enough.
What do you think, Chris? Do you think he's reaching a little bit with saying the reason why Lincoln Riley?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many coaches that came from that air raid tree under Hal Mummy. You know, that there's so that are active coaches. You know, I think all of them are having heavy hearts this week, and certainly their attention may be turned elsewhere. But you know, as Todd mentioned, there's a whole staff that's dedicated to recruiting. Billy Napier says there's an army, you know, is what he calls it. And that's true. There's so many dudes out there that are not only scouting high school, but the transfer portal now. Yeah, while Coach Riley might have, you know, definitely been, you know, shook up by this, and rightfully so, there still is so many people on staff at USC to kind of tread the waters until his focus could be regained. They still got to get ready for a really good Tulane team too.
So I think kind of when I was doing a little bit of monitoring for recruiting, the one thing I noticed that hit me this weekend was Dylan Raiola, how he dropped his #1 commitment for the class of 2024 from Ohio State, which a little sad about that, but find it kind of coincidental. His uncle is got a job in Nebraska, so I mean, I'm kind of thinking that that's going to be a switch, which is going to be, yes, Tyler, I'm going a little 2024 early, but it was just something that when you hear about that, you can't really ignore that.
Actually, I didn't mention Nebraska. Matt Rule had a decent day. Matt Rule is able to take a class outside the top 50 and get inside the top 30 in the overall rankings. And he's pulled a couple good transfers through the portal. So actually, that's another individual. Now, Matt Rule did send this tweet. I don't know what happened, but he sent this cryptic tweet taunting Oregon and Miami and something about the bag, saying that they didn't ghost. It was like money, duck, ghost, money, Miami ghost, meaning they ghosted on an NLI commitment. And I would like to know the backstory behind that. I thought it was funny. I was on the Oregon boards and they were all like, he's being a bad. I'm like, whatever. He's having fun. I don't know what it was. They took Cornelius. Yeah. Cornelius was between Oregon and Nebraska and Ohio State, actually. So I don't know if it was that, but I don't know.
Yeah, that I would like for somebody to ask him to explain that tweet.
That was funny.
It's funny when coaches get on social media and either show that they don't really understand it or do something cryptic like that. Lane Kiffin does it all the time. Yep. I would like to know the story behind that. But yeah, big day for Nebraska. I think that Rule was an excellent hire. I mean, dude won at Temple and Baylor. I'm sure that we all want to see Nebraska, at least be a competent program. I don't think they're ever going to be the dominant location that they were in the 90s and, when Tom Osborne was on the sidelines. But, if there's anybody that could hopefully turn around that program and have it be, the ship righted, I think Matt Rule's the guy for the job. Get Malachi Coleman to stay home in Lincoln. I think that and hopefully, Dominic Raiola's kid ends up, going with his dad, and they'll have a really good foundational player for their program.
I mean, if it works out, good. It was something I had noticed just because I know that signing day was today. I mean, I tried to pay attention a little bit, only because, well, I knew that this was coming up, and just because I've been watching some of those bowl games and trying to see like how some of the different recruits are watching those games too, just so they can see that, hey, even though I'm going to this school, what are some of the other schools I've been offered, how they've done. So I'm wondering what NIL deals are going to be coming out for not only some of the picks that have signed today, but just for some of the ones who have gone the transfer portal, because as much as you'd love to say they went in the portal so that they could have a chance to start, you got to know that there's going to be some money that's going to be changing hands at some point. Thoughts?
So what was your question?
My question is, like, for the NIL deals, do you think that it's going to be more of a focus for the ones who are signing or the ones who are in the transfer portal?
For the prep kids signing or the transfer portal guys?
Both.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I know there's some people saying about the guys head into the transfer portal for an NLI package, but the thing is if that logic, so the schools that are going to have the biggest, I name, image, likeness, I always get screwed back and forth in my head. I'm dyslexic, so I'm like NLI or NIL, but the name, image, likeness of programs are going to be the ones with the biggest donors, and that is going to be the bigger schools, the blue bloods, the ones that have the most money, the most funding. So you think Alabama, you think Georgia, you think Ohio State, you think Michigan, you think Notre Dame, you think USC. So If it was all about that, then you would see more exodus of their best players. So who do you think is going to get the best name, image, and likeness deals? It's going to be the best players for the biggest program in college football. The Bryce Youngs, the CJ Strouds, the Max Duggins, the Stetson Bennett, the Bo Nix, the Michael Pitt. It's going to be those guys. But those guys aren't the ones hitting the portal. The guys hitting the portal for the better programs, for the most part, are guys that are not playing as much. And then the guys who are hitting the portal for the not as good programs, I think are hitting the portal more so that they can play for championships. And yes, and a part of that, they're going to go to a bigger program. So the possibility of getting a better name, image, and likeness deal is definitely possible. Like if you're Dorian Singer leaving Arizona and going to USC, you're probably going to get a better deal. But I think that might have something to play. But if it was all about guys just trying to get the biggest deal and the most amount of money, you would see more of the best players. Like you'd have Drake May, who supposedly was offered something. You'd have those kind of guys hitting the portal more often. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to competition of where a guy decides to go, if he gets a better name, image, and likeness, whether it be the portal or prep, that probably is what seals the deal. But more often than not, it does come down to going to the best program that you're going to win, that's going to put you in the best, give you the best opportunity to go to the NFL. That's going to take precedence over everything. The name, image, and likeness is just something that can get it over the top. But I do think I think there's a little bit like, oh, that's all guys are out there doing and thinking about. If that logic was true, you would see more exodus of the best players from the best programs, seeing if they could have the pot sweetened better, and you'd see them popping in the portal. It's not happening.
Yeah, I think that it's going to come into play more with the prep players, because when you talk about NIL, not only does the cash come in to play, it's branding, marketing, creative opportunities. That stuff resonates with high school kids. And who better to leverage a ton of decades of experience doing that? Swoosh. Phil Knight, Oregon. That's why I feel like the NIL era was just set up for the Oregon program. And a lot of us other Pac-12 programs and fan bases, we are like, sick and tired of Phil Knight bankrolling this program. But when you think of what's legally acceptable now in NIL, who better? And I think that's why a lot of these, we say that the games themselves don't impact where a recruit signs and where they don't. I think that's true to an extent, but Oregon has been pretty successful on the field as well. So it's a perfect storm. They're hitting at the right time with a good recruiter in Lanning. And like I mentioned, there's no better program and, father figure for that program than Phil Knight and what he's able to do for the NIL aspect of recruiting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to agree with you that today, this magic, what happened today, reeked of Phil knowing he could get the advantage of these guys on this, to be able to flip Peyton Bowen, to be able to seal the deal on Mateo Galale, to be able to get Austin Novosad, probably that along with the relationship with Stein, but probably was also able to offer a better deal than Baylor. I mean, yes, I'm pretty sure that the final kicker that was able to get Oregon over the top today was the name, image, and likeness. Yes.
Use it to their advantage.
That would be today. What Oregon was able to do would be a perfect example of what gives you the advantage in name, image, and likeness. I don't think as much the portal. I don't. I mean, yes, it helps you when there's a couple guys going after the same guys in the portal. Maybe like Cornelius got a better deal with Oregon over Nebraska and Ohio State. But I just don't think that's what's the main driver that is driving kids in college. They would rather get a better deal from the school that they're at, especially if they're a good player. Especially if you're Bryce Young, just go to some donors and say, "Hey, can you guys help me out a little? Hey, I'm CJ Stroud. Hey, can you help me out?" That would be better than just hot popping in the portal. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But where name, image, and likeness does make a difference is when Peyton Bowen's like, "Man, should I go to Notre Dame? Should I go to Oklahoma?" And Phil Knight's like, "I got this deal with this program that's connected to Nike, Duck Rising. I mean, we'll sponsor it. We'll give you this contract. Is this sound good?" And yes, that could get you over the top for sure.
The players that drag out their recruitment and have like multiple fan bases following them on social media like Twitter and Instagram, and then you finally sign, you already got thousands of people that followed you, increasing your reach. I mean, all that stuff matters now.
Yep.
It's crazy
Social
that
media
we're talking
reach, yep.
about social media metrics on a recruiting show, but that's the name of the game now. And it's
I think Travis Hunter said if he gets 100,000 subscribers, he's going to immediately do his.
Wild.
He knows where he's going. He's going to Colorado. Let's be honest.
I mean, I know we touched on it briefly with Dion, but that program sitting out in the middle of, I like Boulder, but I like to ski. That's a cool town. I like the vibe. If you're 18 and you've never been to see snow, real snow, man, Dion's got his work cut out for him. But if he can get something going there and turn that program around,
I think on paper they're going to look a lot better. I think on paper they're going to have 5 stars. They're going to have top 100 players. They're going to have some blue chippers. I am a little worried about the actual team aspect. I could see you looking at Colorado's roster and being like, that's kind of on the top end roster in the Pac-12, but also simultaneously being like, well, they're 4-8 again because they don't play very good together as a team. And then you start seeing guys transfer because they did not get enough playing time. I'm wait and see to see the actual success there. I do think he's going to accumulate some talent. I do believe that. I just don't know how good he's going to be.
We can agree with that. I mean, I know that at Jackson State, he definitely was able to do well there, which, I mean, you don't really see a whole lot of recruiting down there as much. So for him to actually be able to not only get players, but I mean, until their loss in the bowl game, they were 12-0 this year, which it's pretty good because you don't always see that happening in the SWAC.
Yeah, but I think he had blue chip guys playing at a level where guys were no stars. Like someone said today, I know Dion was 12-0 with a bunch of blue chippers with no stars. How's he going to be when he has guys on the other side that are like Oregon, USC, like they are as good, and he has to be able to game plan, and he has to be able to, let's say he flips the McLean kid and has Hunter, so he has 2 lockdown corners, but then he's totally misses in the interior defensive line, so teams are like, okay, we'll just run right at you, bring your corners in. I mean, there's just. If he's just planning on this, like he's never going to stack, he's not going to have the talent advantage that he did at Jackson State. I'm just wait and see. I'm skeptical. I really am skeptical.
It's a different FCS landscape too, because they didn't play in the playoff, so you don't have Jackson State playing against like North Dakota State or Montana, all these powerhouses that sometimes beat FBS teams. So. There's not that bad, like, well, he played a good team and got killed. They were better than everybody that they played this year. He played it fully to his advantage.
I think this is a total. It's good for Colorado when it comes to marketing. It's good for them for getting exposure. It's a possible, because the talent acquisition, a high ceiling kind of possibility. But I think the floor is very, very low. I'm telling you, I could see in 2-3 years Colorado being a complete abject disaster like they are right now, and them being like, yeah, we shouldn't hire Dion. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
I'm just not buying into this completely yet. Now he did bring in some good coaches, but once again they're a little more recruiting centric. Tim Brewster's a great recruiter. He used to be University of Minnesota's head coach. He wasn't that good. So I'm curious. I'm wait and see. He's bringing in guys already, and I think he will. It makes the Pac-12 more interesting, and it will make the Pac-10 more interesting. Or will he be in the Big 12?
Who knows? Conference realignment. We don't know how that's going to shake out.
We don't know. We do know that Washington and Oregon probably will go.
If they can't figure this out with the TV contract, and I still have to illegally stream Pac-12 games to watch Washington. Yeah, I said it on live radio. I do that, but I've just had enough. This conference I'm sick of it being a laughing stock. Even in a good year, they were a solid conference this year. But if they can't get eyeballs on their product, yeah, Oregon and Washington should definitely start looking at other options.
Head to Big Ten. The product this year, the Pac-12 was the second best conference. You always have to say the SEC just because of depth, but the Pac-12 had 6 top 20 teams. It was a really good product on the field. You had some great quarterback play. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Cameron Rising, the Heisman Trophy winner. It really was sad that they didn't get a playoff team because the product was definitely I watch all college football, and I thought the Pac-12 product was actually better than anyone but the SEC.
Yeah, it was solid. I know Florida had a ton of issues. A lot of guys opted out of that bowl game, but it still does not seem real to me that the Oregon State Beavers beat Florida by 27 points. That just doesn't happen. The depth that you mentioned, even the 6-6 SEC teams are usually on par with, the middle to, top half, certainly with the Pac-12. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of these bowl games play out. I do know that they're a one-off. You can't really bank the whole program's health on a bowl game. But
yeah, I would not be shocked if the Pac-12 win, like the top 6 teams win all their games. Who's UCLA playing in the Sun Bowl?
God, I have to go back and look.
Do you know who they're playing?
Yeah, you're talking about the bowl games, Alan.
I'm looking right now, sir. That's why, because I had looked up all the different bowl games last week when I was making my picks, and I know my picks didn't go very well, but that's okay.
UCLA plays Pittsburgh. Okay, I could see UCLA beating Pittsburgh. Oregon should beat North Carolina, especially with all the opt-outs and the transfer. Their whole secondary transferred.
Storm Duck, that wide receiver,
yeah, and
Drake May and a bunch of dudes.
I think Washington kind of gets a raw deal because they have to go to Texas. Literally,
John Robinson though.
But that's what I was gonna say. They don't have their best player, so raw deal because they're literally going an hour away from the Texas campus. But I actually think Washington's the better team. So I hope Washington wins. Yeah, I know I said that. I hope Washington beats Texas.
Dude, we better not lose to Sark, man. I can't handle that.
Yeah, and then Utah versus Penn State. I don't love that Phillips is not playing in the game. I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's close. I'd probably lean Penn State a little bit, but who knows? And then you have, USC should, but are they going to be a little bit down because they didn't make the college football playoff? And Caleb Williams was hurt, and Jordan Addison's not playing. Yeah. And it was Voorhees that is out for the season, the starting center. So I'm a little worried the USC doesn't come out and play very good. And then who's the other? I'm missing someone.
UCLA and Pitt was what I saw.
No, he said that one.
I think UCLA wins. I think Washington wins. I just think we're giving a raw deal. Oregon should. If Oregon doesn't win, I'm gonna go there and slap them myself. And then, probably a little more. The most skeptical about Utah, Penn State, and USC Tulane, but I could definitely see the top 6 teams in the Pac-12 all winning.
Yeah,
It's definitely possible.
Utah missing Keithy at tight end too, I think, is a huge loss.
Oh, and Kincaid is out. That's right. Kincaid's not playing.
But Penn State, you mentioned the depth and why you thought the Pac-12 was the second best conference. Well, look at the Big Ten. Beyond the top 2,
3.
Penn State got blown out by both of those teams and played a pretty weak schedule beyond that. I don't know really who they are. I think you're going to find out because Utah is a solid program, but I feel a lot better about that if those 2 players were actually going to suit up for Utah. So, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm just a little worried about the Utah passing game without Kincaid and Keithley.
Yeah.
Because their wide receiver group's not that good.
Yeah, that's a huge part of their offense. But
and Rising, I don't know if Rising's been hurt this year, but he definitely he was in that Oregon game. My gosh, he was terrible.
Yeah, that was.
I can't believe Oregon won. Nix could not literally move. It was literally crippled.
Rising, a couple bonehead turnovers. He clearly looked hobbled. Missed the Wazoo game where they almost lost that one. But, bounced back and took the game on his shoulders and beat USC. I know that fan base is just a Rose Bowl win to Utah would be everything.
Yep. So they're going to come. They're going to have the fan advantage. I am just worried about a couple of the players they're missing. But you're right. Penn State, the 2 good teams they played, they got blown out by Michigan. And Ohio State was a pretty close game until the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
By the way,
there's a couple teams that played Ohio State close into the 4th quarter. Maryland played them close.
Ohio State
just kind of plays with its food, and
Michigan and the Michigan the last 2 years has just blown them out of the building.
Yeah.
After halftime, yes.
I'm telling you, they're Ohio. We'll see how Ohio State, if they get blown out by Georgia. We already had this. We did the last episode.
Yeah,
I think that Luke Fickell is more Ohio State than Ryan Day.
Yeah, and I agreed with you 100% because Luke Fickell, he's an Ohio State legend.
I just haven't liked Ohio State. Just is not physical, like you say. They ding around with bad teams. They have gotten bullied by Michigan the last couple of years. If they get bullied by Georgia.
Yep. No, I know. I mean, that's why for me, I am definitely keeping track of this. And for my pick, I already know who I'm going to pick, whether it's going to be good or bad.
And honestly, Ohio State still lands a good class. They always do. But for their standards, I thought this class was a little under par. And you lost the number 1 player from next year. Yep. And is it Dylan Raiola or Dominic Raiola? Dylan Raiola.
Dominic was his dad.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Dominic, who played for the Nebraska, if you guys didn't know. Yeah. He played and now he coaches there. So I don't know. There's someone to keep an eye on because with all this, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, but with how college football is trending, what did Ryan Day start off as? He was an NFL coach. Will Ryan Day consider taking he started in the NFL. He's an NFL coach. Would he be someone that would consider heading off to the NFL?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but I don't think he's going to yet. Just because, I read an article that they were talking about for an Ohio State where it really is going to depend on how they do next year in the game, because we don't want to have another repeat of how John Cooper was when he came from Arizona State and took over at Ohio State and then went 2-10-1. That was when I was growing up as a kid, and
I remember that.
I still have nightmares from that, especially when we had to do pay-per-view, and we did the pay-per-view for the game with Tim Biakvatuga getting over 316 rushing yards and I believe 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, because if it wasn't in your network, I remember that. I remember it was not in your network. You had to do pay-per-view to get the game.
Yep.
Back in those outdated
days. And that was not a good day because we were watching the whole game and I'll never forget that.
Yeah,
Ever.
yeah. If he loses like he's done to Michigan and
Mhm.
another one more time, I don't know if that fan base is going to let him stay at Ohio State.
That's crazy because you think about it. He's been there. He's what is it? 5 years? Is it 5 years? 4 years off the top of my
I think
head? He,
four.
he's had three college
Four.
football playoff appearances. He's had a national title appearance. I mean, but you don't beat your biggest rival. You sometimes they got rolled by Oregon last year at home. They got rolled by Alabama in the national title game. If they get rolled by Georgia and then they go into next year and they get rolled by Michigan again, and Michigan's going to be good next year. Like I said, they've done very good in the
Yeah.
portal. They bring back a lot of key players. Michigan's going to be a top 5 team next year. And I think they're going to be I think they're going to go to the national title game this year. So, Jim Harbaugh found the key. People are getting on him. And I think he has a good thing going at Michigan. And is he going to drive Ryan Day out of there? I don't think Day gets fired. I think Day heads to the NFL. That's what I think happens.
Probably.
And then you go steal Luke Fickell after 1 year at Wisconsin.
That would be great. That would be great. I would be very happy about that. He would get the second time being the coach at Ohio State.
Oh, man. And Wisconsin's just like, oh.
We'll see what happens. I'm keeping my fingers crossed just because with how coaching is and with how all the schools are, it's going to be interesting no matter what. But I mean, for signing day, like you said, we've already been able to see some of the beginnings for it, which it's been off to a very hot start. And we got a few more days to see how it ends up. Probably next week when we start our playoff show, we'll probably get into that for a little bit. But I mean, with the playoffs, we got to make sure that we hit all 4 teams, make our picks, and see what happens with that. So, Tyler, if we were going to try to reach you outside of here, how would we do that?
At TurnerCast on Twitter.
Okay, and Chris, what about you?
At Nolecore, Nolecore on every single social media platform under the sun, and SouthernGentlemanSports.com.
All right, just because I know that you guys are busy outside of here, so I appreciate the time that we were able to have here. And, well, you guys have definitely made sure that I feel like I need to do a lot more studying on recruiting. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'll definitely see how it does for Oregon and for Washington, even though I'll still have to keep Florida State on the back burner too for you, sir, because, well, I hope the Seminoles do better this year, although I'm still not going to forget how they bought that kick against LSU to start the year. That was a thing of beauty right there.
I was in attendance at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans when that happened. One of the craziest things I've seen live and in person. But while you're on Florida State, shout out to my little cousin Allison, who goes to school with one of their signees from today, 4-star linebacker Blake Nicholson, Manteca High School out in California. So
California.
had to throw that out in there and give her a shout out. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
You can follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast1 and visit us on the website sportscast.net. Make sure to check out our show schedules after we. This is Alan West. That's Tyler Turner. That's Christopher Caravello. Have a great one.
There we go, guys.